Rob Edwards today has been appointed the new Wolves manager, replacing Vitor Pereira. I've also just noticed that Rob Edwards was born on Christmas Day. That's a fact for you that I didn't know, and maybe you didn't before this FM26 experiment, which is going to replicate that move in real life. Rob Edwards has gone to Wolves. We've put him in at Wolves. We've took out the majority of Vitor Pereira's main backroom staff. We've brought in Harry Watlin, who has joined Rob Edwards from Middlesbrough as well. We'll see who else Rob Edwards brings in, but we've booted out some of the backroom staff to start with. What I've also done to try and replicate the situation that Wolves are in at the moment, whilst we can't do where we are in real life and Wolves only having 2 points, I have given them at the start of the Premier League season a 9-point deduction. That's realistically where they are at the moment. Only 2 points at the bottom of the table. You've got teams on 10 points outside the relegation zone above them, but it's effectively 9 points with the goal difference. So I've put Wolves at -9 because ultimately that's what they need to stay up. I've said to people, I think if Rob Edwards can keep Wolves up the way they've started, he almost deserves a statue outside the stadium, really. So Wolves, -9 points to go in. The only other thing I've done as well is given the club a 0 morale rating. I don't know what that's going to do to the players, but hopefully that's going to maybe decrease the new manager bounce that I think could possibly happen with Rob Edwards in the game. And after all, they are predicted to finish in P14. So let's see how Wolves get on, but it is a authentic situation that they're 9 points adrift at the bottom of the table, so they've got a lot of work to do so far. So let's see if they have a good start. So we've rolled around to today's date, which is the 12th of November. Where are Wolves? I'm not looking, but they're in the bottom 3 still, but how far adrift are they? Well, they've got 3 points, and actually they're not bottom of the table. So after 11 games, they've won 3, drawn 3, and lost 5. So if Rob does that in his first set of games, what will that be? 9 points, 12 points in 11 games. I think Wolves fans would take that. Ultimately, I think there's been 11 play. Yeah, of course they have. Because this is counting where we are now. So 9 points in 11 for Wolves. If they'd done that in real life, they would be there or thereabouts. They'd be a point off being out the bottom 3. And I think Wolves fans would be fairly happy with that. They've actually kept a really tight ship at the back. Second least goals conceded in the league. But the problem is that they aren't scoring goals. So that's disappointing. But it has been a decent start for Rob Edwards' side. Unfortunately, as per the experiment yesterday, there's just a glitch when you go into the fixture schedule. You can't see how they're getting on in general. If we have a look at their form, though, which you might just be able to see, they've won 2 of the last 5, lost against Chelsea just now, but it has been a decent start for Wolves. Let's have a look who the main men are for Wolves. So, from a goals perspective, Strand Larsen has scored 5 so far this season, Wang Hee-chan with 3. Assists-wise, a couple across the board, Andre Hugo Bueno as well. The main players that are playing, yeah, so Jose Sar's made 12 appearances in goal. And from an average rating perspective, Bueno's had a good start to the season. I can't pronounce his name, sorry. At right wing back. Looks like Strand Larsen's done decently going in. But the goals just aren't flowing for Wolves, and that's probably their main problem. They're out of the Carabao Cup, so they've been knocked out of that. Not that they're going to be too worried about that. I do wonder maybe if we can see, I don't think we will, who Wolves were knocked out by in that competition. But I'll tell you what, that is impressive for Wolves to have got off the bottom of the table, considering they started with a 9-point deficit. I know Brighton have had an absolute shocker. But they're there or thereabouts, and actually with the goal difference they've got, that's effectively another point. So, yeah, they've had a decent start. Well, I think the wheels might be starting to fall off all of a sudden for Rob Edwards. Maybe it was a new manager bounce. Bear in mind, again, the 9 points deduction, so they would have been outside the relegation zone, but trying to replicate what's going on in real life, Wolves are now only on 12 points. And that amount of goals is a big problem. Only 14 in 23 games. Again, at the back, actually, they have been pretty solid. Going forward, I mean, 14 goals, that's the lowest in the league. Palace, surprisingly, have only scored 15 as well. But Wolves are really, really struggling up front. We've gone to the end of January, so let's see if Wolves have bought anybody in. Transfer history, they've bought a couple of players. Rob Edwards is now under pressure. Not really too much of a surprise, even though he's done decently, but again, goals scored just isn't happening for Wolves, unfortunately. So they've bought in Chris Wood from Nottingham Forest. 2.3 million. I think Chris Wood might be at the end of his contract, possibly at Forest at the end of this season. So I think that's a pretty good signing. And actually, as a championship signing, if they go down, Chris Wood in his past life at Leeds has had experience in the championship and done very well at it as well. So that could be a good move for both parties there. So Wolves really struggling with goals, albeit in the 2 games he's played so far he hasn't scored. 2 difficult games, Newcastle and Man City, but not scoring in either one of those. How are we looking from a goals perspective? Now, Strand Larsen had scored 5 when we were last with the team. He hasn't scored again since. Wang Hee-chan had 3, he's now got 5. Look at that. The 2 main strikers have scored 5. Can't pronounce, is it Tolu? Yeah, I think Tolu. We'll use Tolu. He's come on a lot off the bench. He's not really been able to do much. They've even tried to experiment with a younger player, Nathan Fraser, who's come off the bench for Rob Edwards 9 times. You have to say, really, that the Wolves board haven't particularly backed Rob Edwards in this transfer window. I mean, defensively, they look pretty good. I'll remind you again, they have only conceded the 5th most in the league. Is that because Rob Edwards might be setting up a bit too defensively? Not too sure, but nevertheless, the form is really bad for Wolves at the moment, and they are 6 points adrift of the club in 17th, West Ham United. So they need a win pretty quickly. What are the next couple of games? Bournemouth at home, Chelsea at home, Forest away. No easy games in this Premier League. Well, we've got to the middle of March, and every week as I'm going through this simulation, Rob Edwards on the verge of the sack. Rob Edwards on the verge of the sack, but he's still at Wolves, amazingly. But there you go. Brentford clash. Could be Rob Edwards last. But either sticking with him maybe to go for the Championship, because that looks like that's what's going to happen. Wolves, I think, were on 13 points, weren't they? I mean, if you look at the first half, which is a bit misleading, because we've got to take 9 points off that. So, in effect, it was 20 points. But they've only had 5 in their last 10. 1 win in 10, 7 defeats in that run of 10. Yeah, it's not going very well for Wolves. And all of a sudden, they are a long way back. 11 points behind Leeds at this point. Noting that, again, in real life, they're only on 2 points after 11. In 18 games to get 14 points, again, it's obviously not going to be nowhere near enough to go and stay up. And again, goals is still a problem. And they've been a bit leaky in the back recently as well. Liverpool have just put 3 past them, which isn't much of a surprise, I guess. Let's have a look again at the strikers' rating. So, oh, look at that. Chris Wood's had a really good start, hasn't he? 5 goals in 10. Strand Larsen's only scored 1 more. So, probably, Chris Wood probably got pretty much all the goals. So, I think Tolo's only scored 1 more. I mean, they're still persistent with Strand Larsen, but 6 goals from 31 isn't a very good return. Chris Wood, though, could he keep Wolves up? I think it's going to be a real difficulty at this stage, given they're 11 points behind, 9 games to go, 27 points to play for. Yeah, I can't see Wolves staying up. What has surprised me, though, that they have stuck with Rob Edwards, given that every week they're going to get rid of him. And they keep losing, Wolves do. But as I say, maybe it's not something that tends to happen in Football Manager. Maybe Wolves are considering that they are going down, and maybe considering the points deduction possibly as well. Again, without the points deduction, they'd be in 18th place. I know that's a kind of in-game facet that I've created to try and make it as close to real life as possible, but maybe the board are considering that as well. No doubt about it. 1 win in 5 games ain't going to be enough to keep Wolves in the league. Well, we're at the 10th of May now, so it's nearly the end of the season. Rob Edwards is still in charge. Wolves are the bottom of the league, but if he's still in charge, are Wolves possibly still in the fight to stay up? They've had 3 draws in the last 3 games. Are they still crawling possibly at the bottom of the table? No. They've gone. No wins again in the last 5. 3 draws, we've just seen that. 2 defeats before that. And 22 points for Wolves. It's not going to... 25 goals scored. That's been their real problem this season in this simulation. Chris Wood, again, has been a very worthwhile signing. 7 goals from 18 appearances. Strand Larsen, again, despite, I think, 5 goals in the middle of November, he's just completely dried up. Yet, he's still been persistent with 35 appearances. Wang Hee-chan has probably been the man who's stepped aside, possibly, for Chris Wood. You can see they're playing 2 up top. Chris Wood, still Strand Larsen. Defensively, they've started to become a bit leaky. 3 goals against Arsenal. So, they are down, but Rob Edwards is still in his position. Under pressure, reports of his demise might be premature. Started badly. Terrible 15-game run. An unforeseen relegation battle. Well, they've been bottom pretty much all season, so I don't think it's been an unforeseen relegation battle. And there you go. That is the news 8 days ago. So it was last week that Wolves were finally relegated to the Championship. A terrible 15-game run. I'd love to know how bad that run was. One apiece, though, at the Molineux. Did see Wolves go down against Sunderland as well. I guess a little bit like in real life, maybe it was a long time coming. We're going to go to the end of the season, though, now. The fact that Rob Edwards hasn't been sacked yet gives me a glimmer of hope the club might just keep him in charge. So that's the end of the season, and there aren't any jobs open at the moment in the Premier League. So I've just seen Southgate's been sacked by Crystal Palace. Maresca's lost his job at Chelsea. So, is the Wolves' job still Rob Edwards's? Rob Edwards's? Two plurals there. So they ended the season on 25 points. They got a win. Who did they win against? So they got a win against Fulham, a 1-0 win against Fulham, to give the fans at Molineux in their last game in the Premier League something to cheer about. Strand Larsen hasn't scored in 10 hours of football, 6 goals this season, and it's a record low haul of Premier League goals, 26 goals. I don't know if that's just a record low in the last few seasons or whether that's a record low of all time. I'm not exactly sure, but let's have a look at the end of the season. Chris Wood ended the season on 7. Again, joint top goal scorer after only being there for half the season. I think that proves it all, doesn't it? Highest rated players, David Muller-Wolf had a good season. Arias did decently, Andre. But only one player you can kind of ignore, really, for Lopez getting a 7 out of 10 as an overall for the rest of the season. Creative players like John-Rick Bellegarde, 1 goal and 1 assist. That is really where Wolves have been let down this season. Defensively, they were okay-ish, but ultimately if you're not scoring the goals, it's not going to go all that well for you. If you look at conceding, they were down there, but again, none more really than Forest that stayed up comfortably. Brighton, it was that gap up front that was the real problem for Wolves. And actually, I haven't watched a lot of Wolves this season in real life, but I watched them against Chelsea, and to be fair, they actually weren't too bad going forward, but they just couldn't find the net. So that maybe is what Wolves need to do in January. That's what they need to do to support Rob Edwards. I think Chris Wood's a good signing, but Chris Wood alone wasn't going to do it for them. But as Rob Edwards hasn't been sacked, is it going to be a case that they're just preparing for life in the Championship? We'll go forward to the start of July, which is kind of the official start of the Championship season, and see if Rob is still in situ. So Wolves are pretty strong favourites to bounce straight back up along with Crystal Palace and Leeds, who they've come down with. Are they still with Rob Edwards in charge? He's still there. Rob Edwards is still there. They've released 13 players, the most high profile. I think one of those has got to be Matt Doherty at the end of the season. They have brought in Krejci, who I think might have been a pre-arranged transfer. I feel like he's been there last season, so that might have been something that was pre-arranged anyway. But apart from that, obviously, it is only the 1st of July. But Rob Edwards is still in charge at Wolverhampton Wanderers and second favourites to come back up from the Championship. Now, not to rub salt in the wounds, but the last time Wolves went down to the Championship, they went down again to League One. So is that going to happen again? Rob Edwards, though, gets a second chance. Have Middlesbrough come up? No, they haven't. So that's okay for Rob Edwards in terms of thinking, oh God, I'm not going to Wolves for Borough to then go back up to the Premier League. So they didn't go up. Just out of interest, is Ipswich, Norwich and Sheffield United who have come up. I don't think Sheffield United are coming up in real life, are they? Wolves are down to the Championship, back with the faithfuls of Stoke, the Albion, all those local sides who they love to play against. That's going to be the end of this experiment for the first part. I could continue and do a part 2 and see how Rob Edwards gets on in the Championship. I am somewhat surprised that Rob Edwards has kept his job at Wolves, but I think this is possibly an appointment as an outsider looking in, that they might be preparing for life in the Championship. That it was no good bringing in a short-term solution. Well, they could have done one of two things. They could have brought in that short-term solution, a big Sam figure for the end of the season to try and stay up, or bring in somebody like Rob Edwards who has got experience in the Championship, bringing teams up. Yes, he did get relegated with Luton. Might see if that happens again, possibly with Wolves. But this experiment hasn't particularly worked for Wolves. They have gone down to the Championship, but they've put their trust in Rob Edwards to bring them back. If you want to see a part 2 of this experiment, let me know down in the comments. Let me know what you think about Rob Edwards' appointment at Wolves in real life, and hope you've enjoyed another one of these FM26 experiments. I'm quite enjoying these at the moment, so I might pump a couple more out if I can think of the ideas for them. Of course, this one is pretty topical. But if you enjoyed, leave a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe and all that good stuff. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.